Hey guys, what's up? It's Alexander Williamson here with the secret history living inside of your aquarium and mine. So, today I'm going to talk about something that you may not think has much value if you're a seasoned pro, but I bet you there's some things that will come up that maybe will be helpful. Maybe you haven't thought about in a while, you didn't know that certain products were out on the market, or that new science books, things like that, have been written, and that new ways of doing things are available out there. So, whether you're a seasoned pro or somewhere in between, you're low tech. What's up, fake name? You're a low tech aquascaper. Somewhere in the middle of, you don't have all the CO2 and everything yet, but you have fish and plants. That's a great place to be to watch this. And if you're new altogether, that's probably the very best situation you could be in to watch this video. So, let's flip this around real quick. I want to show you one of my tanks. So this I would put at the higher end of what you can do with called a kit tank, or the type of components that you would find in a kit tank. And I've pieced this together with pieces I've found all over town, all over the hobby, online, things like that. And if you like living plants like I do, and I'll let me explain too that we're gonna discuss really quickly before I go into. We're gonna get into this whole list over here, which is what a kit may have versus what a kit is missing, and then what you really need out of those things, and also the things that you may already have around the house that can help. So we'll get to that soon. This is a live stream, so if you have questions, feel free to pop in. If not, and you just have an opinion or a product or something that you like that helped you when you were setting up stuff, if you're one of those seasoned pros that wants to join, feel free to comment or leave a comment in either the live stream or later, to let people know whatever that may be, if it's a substrate you like, or planted versus plastic plants versus heated and non-heated tanks, those sort of things we can get into. Now, on the other side of the room, I also have different setups. I have a bare minimum setup breeding tank. I have a tank with no heater in it and no filter in it even, and it's just for spawning right now. It used to be a shrimp tank. I have a shrimp tank with a sponge filter in it and a heater, but the heater's off. It's just room temperature right now, and a light that's not doing much to grow plants. And then on these middle shelves, it's kind of a hodgepodge. There's no CO2 or anything. These are just 20-gallon long tanks, as we call them in the hobby, and I'm just breeding different fish. And in all of these, I am using the big foam thing you see there. That's what I'm using as the filter. And then this is the pump, the air pump, and this actually fuels all four, if not five, if I wanted that one to be running, tanks. And so if you set your room at room temperature, depending on the fish you keep, you can keep fish really inexpensively. And I'm not just talking about bettas and white cloud minnows or things like that. You can actually keep guppies and platies, mollies, different shrimp. You can keep fish like this little endler here. Some tetras will be okay. And so there's a wide variety, which we can talk on another video about, of things that you can keep even without heat and all that. But if you want to keep exotic fish, if you want to keep funky, interesting fish, you probably need to get a little more gear than you would in other cases. I've got shrimp in this tank, these yellow neocaradinas. I've got gouramis. We've got blue gouramis and yellow sunset gouramis. We've got a Siamese algae eater. We have Aru2s. So, Otter Creek, what's up? Welcome to the chat. In here, here's another golden back shrimp. Still waiting to find a pregnant female in here. I've seen one so far, but there's only a dozen of these shrimp, so it actually surprises me that I can find any of them. But as you can see, I am the type of aquarist who likes to have lots of plants in their tank. And before we talk about anything, I'm just going to let you guys look at this tank, just watch the fish swim by if that's relaxing, or just listen to me chat. And I'm just going to explain a couple basic things that you need to know um, before really getting into this hobby. Even if you're just buying, a 5-gallon plastic kit for your betta that is not heated, something like that, that's $29.99 American US dollars, or whatever it is, $40 Canadian. I don't know what the euro would be right now, probably somewhere 25 euros. It kind of depends where you import it from, but we're going to get into that. And if you have any questions, just as always, just mention them in the comments. So the way a fish tank works is pretty important to know before you get a fish tank. Now, you may think you know, but I assure you, unless you have studied this and gotten into the hobby a little bit, you probably don't. If you just had a fish tank as a kid or whatnot, and I'm talking as someone who's 30 years old, I'm talking as someone, you could be probably 25, and still fish tanks have come an amazing distance in mass public culture recently, like aquascaping and things like that, which is to lay out your tank with substrate in a position. Substrate refers to your gravel or your soil, whatever you're going to be using. There's so many more choices now than there used to be. Between, it used to be basically, do you want river rock, lava rock, or some weird, funky, bright colored rock? Black or white or sand. Like, those were kind of your choices at the big box stores. Now with the internet, you can always, I would say anyways, when you're at a big box store, like Petco, like PetSmart, most of them will match prices if you find a comparable item, and they'll for sure match prices if you find the item there, like verbatim, the same brand and everything. They'll match, price match, and they're pretty darn good about that. So, before you get fish into your tank, you need to cycle your tank. And you may remember this, may be new to you. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. We can have a whole other video on that. You can Google what it means to cycle your tank. And some of the other things we'll talk about in a little bit, you can look up what exactly you need to know to do that. But let me just tell you that you can cycle a tank in several ways. The first one is by waiting and being patient and putting a fish or some plants or even a little bit of ammonia without the fish and plants into your water and just running your fish tank for a month, like 3 to 6 or 7 weeks, depending on your fish tank and water and all that jazz. And basically what happens is, as long as there's something creating ammonia and nitrites, nitrogen, which will be in the water too, just from the tap even, there's an amount of that. And in the atmosphere, it's 70% nitrogen. So that stuff gets into the water, and believe it or not, your drinking water, even when chlorinated, but especially once you put dechlorinator, as we all do when we change water in a fish tank, unless you're living on a well system, then you don't need to worry about it. But when you put in that dechlorinator or evaporate the chlorine off in 24 to 48 hours of sitting of having water sitting somewhere, then all of a sudden life springs out of nowhere seemingly, right? Like on here, I cleaned this tank literally earlier today, and you can see even in a clean tank, you've got algae, you've got fungi, you've got just different things going on, especially when you have biological elements to the tank. So for me, I always start my cycles by putting a ton of plants in the tank. Now you can use plastic plants and things like that, but the cool thing about buying real plants, and even if you only have a Petco near you, that's okay. You can get some plants to start and then maybe order some other ones off the internet, aquaticarts.com or Flip Aquatics or LRB Aquatics. There's a lot of great people out there. You'll find them. Even on Etsy and things like that, there are lists of people selling plants for your aquarium as well as wooden decor and things like that. And that will all add to the diversity of your biome in your tank. So when your tank is new, you could throw your fish in water with no chlorine. Like as long as the chlorine's gone, you could throw your fish in the fish tank and it would be fine until it started pooping and peeing and doing what fish do. And any food you fed it that it didn't digest will rot. And what eats rotten food? Well, bacteria and microbes, protozoa, single cell organisms, many of which are so small they literally float into the room just from being on other things, like, oh, they fall off trees or they're in the wind and they're on your jacket and you don't realize it. Just like people get allergies, there's these little teeny tiny things smaller than the eye that in the form of seeds and spores that basically will land in your tank. And even if you had a completely sterile tank, as soon as you put tap water in it, as soon as the chlorine is out, and even if you didn't take the chlorine out, you'd come back in a month or two and you would find traces of new life. But we like that life. That bacteria, that is part of what we call cycling a tank. So what you need is good bacteria. And that bacteria actually forms without your help. All you need to do, really, is make sure there's either, you could call it sacrificial, but a fish that's pooping and creating waste and you're feeding it, so that's input. And that waste is then building up in the water. So you're thinking of it as the ammonia and the nitrites and things like that the fish are exuding when they're done digesting food. That goes out into the water. And if it were to sit there, it would poison the fish over time. And it does if your tank isn't cycled, especially if you dump 20 fish in there. And they're all doing that. Pretty soon your ratio of clean water to gross water gets really high. So you need something to handle that. And that's where filters come in. And really what you need out of a filter is a lot less than you think. So what you need in a filter is this: a sponge. So basically, you just need a surface. Like here you can see there's some algae growing on it. There's little specks of whatever's floating around in the water on it. And there's shrimp eating whatever those little specks are off of it because it's full of yummy stuff to them. So that's all you need, is you need a surface. And don't get me wrong, all of your tank, including the ground, so see the shrimp's eating off the ground, all of your tank acts as a surface. Stones, porous stuff's better, like wood and plants, acts as surfaces for this stuff to get growing. And just naturally, just because of Kroger Marcus, hello, Keith, hello, Eleanor, hello, Eleanor says it's a nice escape from politics. We'll try to keep it peaceful in here tonight. There's a lot of bummer, scary, I don't know, just ridiculous news out in the world. And right now, we're just going to try to help people set up their fish tank and understand their fish tank. Have a couple friends, including my friend Ben, who will be on the channel again soon, who I just gave a 20 fish tank to, and I really wanted him to have a video to look at and then help him make some decisions, as well as another friend in our club, uh, to decide, do I buy a kit? What do I really need in my fish tank? So on and so forth. And that answer, as you probably figured, is not straightforward. It depends totally on what you want to do. Let me save you some time if you've made it this far into the video and say, if you just have a betta or a goldfish and you have a 5 or 10 gallon kit tank, you will be fine. You will be fine. Your fish will be fine. If you like the style of the tank, if you like the curves, and it's quiet or doesn't use too much energy and whatnot, you will be fine to keep either plastic plants, plants like these ferns, or like Anubias. There's another fern, Kabamba, hornwort, water lettuce, and duckweed, things like that. Stuff that can live in low light. It's usually green and stringy, and or tough. So like there's an Anubias back there, just hanging out, coming out of the back of that log. And if you just want that, and those plants are fine, or plastic plants, then that's great. I would totally recommend one of those small aquarium kits. It's when you get into the medium to long term aquarium stuff that you start needing to make decisions. And Maple Street Aquatics, hello. So we have decisions in a kit. And so I was talking about how things you get cycled. So you get your tank cycled, you can watch videos on it, but basically you have enough of this life growing on all your surfaces and in your sponges, or in your, this is called filter floss up here. If this were running full blast, it's just running enough to keep it cycled. And then in here is a sponge. And same with most of the filters that you're going to see aftermarket. Whereas up here, I have nothing but just this air-powered sponge filter that you see makes bubbles come up. That helps oxygenate the water. So that's one of the 3 things that your fish will need, and that is oxygenated water. And not even all fish need that. There's some catfish, there's bettas, you've got any labyrinth fish that can breathe out of water, licorice gouramis and things like that, don't need the air. Certain catfish don't need the air. I've always used endlers, or live bears is what they're called, but like these guys. Now these guys are too pretty. These are my breeding bunch of a strain that I've kind of monkeyed with and created, and same with these guys, but they are the right kind of fish. They are endlers, related to guppies, and I will usually throw 1 to even 5, if it's like a 20 gallon, into the tank. Get rid of the chlorine with the stuff that you buy to dechlorinate, and then I will just run the tank and put as many plants in and wood and rocks and things like that, to help create surface area. So the 3 things when you're looking at what the bare minimum of a tank needing are oxygenation, and that's tied to water flow too. So oxygenation comes when, these are hooked up, sponge filters are hooked up to different forms of either air pump, or you can use a pressurized rig if you'd rather, on the go battery pack rigs to do pressurized air. Or you can have a filter like the type that comes with almost all the modern packs, where I've got the tops all popped off for you, but they look like this when they're closed. As you can see, I'm not running these filters currently. But they usually allow you to control flow a little bit and then access the filter, which I use this acrylic cottony stuff. And in these packages, when you buy a filter, you'll see that you get something that looks like this. And this is either carbon in here that's activated, which means it's organic, and chemically it's ready to bond to things. So it's ready to grab stuff out of the water, be it good or bad, and hold on to it and keep it trapped for you. Hey, Bob. And these oftentimes will fit, like here's a Tetra. This is for a big filter, the 75-gallon dual filter. But these clip into the filters. Water runs through this. And some of these filtration systems have 3 types of filtration. Now I'm going to tell you a secret here, and that is you really only need one, and that is a biological filtration system, which is surface area. Even your tank can be the surface area. Now, for most new keepers, I wouldn't recommend that because it's hard to get it balanced without any filter. You need lots of plants, and you need the right amount of light, the right fish load, things like that. If you're interested in a filterless and water change free fish tank, you can check out Diane. What is her name? Diane. Is it Waldron? The Waldron method? The Walstead. Diane Walstead's method of fish keeping, and that is using actual soil. And in theory, you can keep a fish tank without any gear, just the glass and natural contents. But that gets trickier, and believe it or not, the simpler you get with your aquarium, the more years of experience I would recommend before trying it. So, the secret is that you don't need to buy the $100 or $50 or $35 filter necessarily. And the problem with these filters is that most people think that you need to buy those packs that slide in here and that you need to replace those when they get dirty every month or whatnot. And you don't. You don't need to do that. All you need to do is find either a sponge or something with the most surface area as possible. So in here, this is just acrylic batting. Like if you cut open a teddy bear, this is what would be inside. I shove this into my filters. I yank out whatever came with them, and then I make sure that there is still a sponge to get coarse and heavy sediment here. And then usually I'll leave this open, or I will put bio rings in here. So that way, when water comes in here, it gets sucked up, comes through here, it goes in through a coarse sponge, which sucks out any of these big pieces of stuff floating, and you know, if there forbid was a dish or dirt or something floating in there, that would take care of that. And this is a filter that needs changing right now, but you can still see, look how clear the water is as it comes up and out versus it gets all dirty at the entrance. I don't think it's a low enough filter that I can show you what. Oh, here we go. So when it's entering, you're getting the junk is getting pulled towards it, and you're getting this buildup, and this gets clogged, and you'll have to unclog it. That's just a thing about hang off the back filters. Now, if you want to combine the best of both worlds, you can pay $4 or $5 online, and you can get a little filter sock or filter cover that will go over that. It will stop little shrimp and fish from getting sucked into these kinds of HOB filters or hang off the back filters, and that will also create surface area for the good bacteria. So as you can see, even since I was talking, there's more shrimp hanging out on this thing eating the good bacteria that we talked about earlier. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, so we've got bacteria that's converting all the poo and pee that fish make and the rotten food. It's converting it back into nitrites. And then once it's converted into nitrites, plants will eat that up. They'll eat up the ammonia too, that's been broken down by biological practices and methods, cycles in nature essentially that you're replicating in your tanks. But then that nitrite turns into nitrate. Now, nitrate is much less toxic to fish. So, ammonia is the most toxic, nitrite is the more toxic, but not going to kill your fish right away. They can stand a couple parts per million of it, or 10 or 15 parts per million of it. It can make them sick in the long run at low levels, even. So it's better to have zero. And that is how you know your tank has cycled, as we said, is when your nitrites are at zero. That means that biologically your tank can handle the amount of fish and plants and things that you have in it. And it is at homeostasis, it is at chill mode, it is chillaxing. That tank is happy. You can add a couple more fish. It may take a couple days for that to catch up to make more bacteria colonies to deal with more fish or whatnot, but you will get to a point where you reach your holding capacity. And if you're like me and you're willing to, so the nitrates will be in the water, and plants use these up. So if you have a ton of plants, they can use those up. So in this tank, I really don't need to do many water changes because there's a lot of fish in here, but there are plants packed all the way, I mean everywhere, underneath plants, on top of plants, underneath plants for days. And so they eat those nitrates, and I don't honestly need a filtration system like some people would want for a smaller tank. So the more organic you can with it, I know a lot of times people think that it's scary to have living plants in your tank, but check out my other videos, ask me a question, talk to your friends, look online. Plants, honestly, in the long run, are going to be easier to keep in your tank for your tank as a whole and for having to do less work than they are if you have plastic plants. The only exception to that might be some really aggressive fish that eats them. Goldfish, surprisingly, will eat any plant it can get its hand on, except for maybe some of these stiffer, like Anubias or sword ferns, possibly some of the val that's thicker, this plant, Valsinaria, and the wood, obviously. But goldfish will eat pretty much everything else. So then the question comes in, why on this tank do I have two filters? Well, for me, this tank is set up almost like a hill stream, and this is a little more into fish and types of fish tanks and things like that. But basically, I'm keeping the water churning and flowing, and you can see all this bacteria living on here. You also see a little limpet we have chilling out there, freshwater limpet. Did I ever put a limpet in here? No, I did not. So it came in on plants, or it came in on a fish as a baby, little tiny embryo of a limpet, or I don't know. They're probably little single cell egg things. Here's a baby snail. That's another thing that people shy away from is snails in their tank. But snails eat a lot of waste, and as long as you don't have a ton of snails, like hundreds of snails, one, they can be beautiful, and there's cool types of snails like the nearite snail that will actually eat hardened algae off the glass, so I never need to scrape the glass. This is as bad as this glass gets in this tank. You see that foggy green layer here that just looks more cloudy than anything right there? That's as bad as it gets because I have the right kind of fish in here. So let's move on from that. So now we know that you need to cycle your tank. Are there shortcuts? Because, man, when you get your tank and you want it cycled, you want it cycled. Yeah, there's shortcuts. You can get water from a friend's tank, or you can get gravel from a friend's tank. And as long as their tank isn't sick and all their fish are healthy and everything, you can just put that in your tank. And as long as you have a good amount, like 20% of the surface area, of the water, or I don't know, let's say 30% of the surface area. This is a totally unscientific number I'm throwing out there. So in an empty tank, if you just had stone in there, like gravel, you would have like 90% of your surface area would be the stones, because each stone has surface all over, and even though they're small, there's a ton of them. And so each of those, just like back in here, has surface area, which has, even if you can't see it, the goodies that need that help take care of your tank. So let's look at this list real quick. Sorry, my elbow literally just hit this, but this is the line for stuff that kits usually don't have or do a good job of. Now, pricing, I kind of sketched it off to the side. You can ignore it for now, or you can look at it, whatever you feel like. But online, when you look at a kit, you've got the tank. You've got a hood oftentimes on a tank, and this is the best case scenario. And you've got a light in that hood, or you've got a clip-on light for on top of the tank if it's a rimless type tank, like the newer models I'm seeing by Fluval and things like that. You oftentimes will get a little net, which is, a $2 add-on item. You'll get filter packs, which, like I said, I throw away. Honestly, I have kept the filter packs from these hang-off-the-back filters. They're expecting you to come in and spend 14 to 30 or 40, however much they are, depending on how big of a tank you have, bucks on these filters every month or whatever. All you need to do is take the big old sponge in here and the cotton batting that's $3.99 for a big bag of it, that's enough for this entire room to change out, $3.99. All I do is I get some unchlorinated, so it's been dechlorinated with either prime or through evaporation, and I will squeeze out that filter and the it's called filter floss, but it looks like cotton batting, although it's acrylic so that it doesn't rot. And I will squeeze that out. I'll shake it through the water in a bucket of even just water that's already come out of the tank that's quote-unquote dirty, that just has nitrates in it. And I will just wring that out pretty good. It'll still be kind of tan colored, but then I'm not killing that good bacteria that was like so carefully created in my ecosystem, and I pop it back in here. So why do I have these filters if I could just have a sponge filter? The sponge filter could cost me as little as $10, like in this tank. Look at this tank. That heater's not on, by the way. So I have a sponge filter, and I have let's pull out this cord, and I have this miniature heater that was $9 on sale. So for $9 and $5, so $14, I had everything I need to filter this tank. And yes, there are fish living in here, and it's at 65 degrees, and there's some danios and some guppies in here right now. This is a tank that I'm giving to a friend soon, hopefully. But my point being is, that's all they need if you want to change the water on them. So these tanks, yes, I agree that you would want a light. You'd want to be able to see your fish. With plants, yes, I would want a light. But what sort of plants do you want? If you just want a few plants that look like these guys, or moss, or the stuff that's growing up in here, this green big leaf stuff, these are Anubias or Bulbitis, this is the fern, the seaweed looking stuff here, then you don't need big lights like this. You can buy a light like this Nicrew light, and you can get these Nicrew lights for, and you can get small versions of them too. Let's take a look over here. You can get this Aquaneat light, and I think it's like 15 or 10 or $20 depending on the size. Here's their small size. Let me turn it on. And that provides plenty of light for looking at your fish, and even like it's keeping these lily pads and an Anubias alive. Right now, there's 2 fish in this tank. That's it, and I'm trying to get them to spawn and do their thing. So this tank doesn't have any filtration or air pump or anything because the fish simply will not deplete that air or any of the oxygen, and they will not have enough time to create the messy chemicals, the ammonia and stuff in here. Where the heck are they, by the way? I don't know. They're anywhere. They're ruby tetras. They should really be reproducing in like bog water. I said bog, not. There's no N in anything I said. I know that's what someone's going to comment on. But in any case, there you have it. Now over here we have a shrimp tank. Not the prettiest shrimp tank. And look at this. The light just fell in the tank. I've done that a lot. And with even some of the cheapest lights that you get online, they can fall in the tank. And, you know, be careful not to shock yourself. But they will hold up to some punishment. So thank you, Bob, for reminding people they can join the Facebook group. Always get help. You know, this podcast is to or live cast is to remind people, you know, everyone starts somewhere. We all need a refresher on things sometimes. And, you know, there's no shame in being someone coming to a forum full of people with experts, people like Bob who've been keeping for years, or people like me who've been keeping for years, and asking for help or suggestions or what they think you should do. That's where we all got our start. That is what's awesome about the internet, and I want to build a positive community around the secret history living in your aquarium. I hope this is, facilitating that. So in here we have a shrimp tank. So what do I do if I just want shrimp or just a betta? All I have is a filter that is hooked up to an air pump. As I said, you can get air pumps anywhere from, I mean, sometimes I've seen them for like $6.99 on sale. They take very little energy. You get a light for 15 or 20 bucks. This tank right here was $12 after tax because Petco has what we call a dollar per gallon sale. And they used to have it once a year, and now it seems like they have it every 4 months or so. I don't even know the rhyme or reason to it. But that sale is insane. They sell things for so cheap, tank-wise, up to 40 gallons. Depends on the store. Some will go to 55, some will go to 40, some will go to 29. But I got my 40-gallon, the one over here. I got it for $40 plus $5 tax. And that's what that tank cost me. These filters I got used. One of them, another one was a $37 filter. I took the charcoal pack out that came in it, because usually you get filter floss in one pack and charcoal in the other, and then either some like balls with lots of surface area, these clay rings or cylinders, or a sponge. And that is your filter that they'll call a mechanical filter. Mechanical meaning that sponge catches stuff. So a net is quote unquote mechanical in that sense. A grate, that is mechanical according to the fish industry, the fish hobbyists. So it's kind of interesting. But that's as simple as it is. And that really is all you need. It is a strainer to strain out the big stuff. So you can see here, I'm doing this for flow. I have this one, I've monkeyed with this so that it's going around this way, and then there's some coming out this way, but it's mostly drawing in, which actually creates a big circle for the fish to have a current in here. And then there's a big hill in here and rocky voids, and there's actually some down currents that have made the plants grow the way they are because of that. But this is all a thing I'm doing because of the species I'm keeping. None of this is needed, even though it looks like fancy, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it looks like I know what I'm doing somewhat, but it's not what you need for your average if you want to keep an angelfish and some neon tetras and things like that. you can get going for so much less than you see here. And Bob, thanks again for being an awesome admin. You're the best programmed bot I've ever created. I'm just kidding. Uh, Bob's an awesome guy to ask for help. If you have a question in the community, try to spam him as much as possible. I really want to reward him for being, uh, such a help and volunteering his time in this group. So make sure to annoy Bob Kaler. No, I'm just kidding. If you do have a question, though, there are a lot of people in the Facebook group now. They're the people from this channel that are dedicated and really in it for community, friendship, to learn things, to get the drop on sales. And a lot of times on this channel, I'll try to get you guys discount codes and coupons for different plants and different things like that, and let you know what's going down. So, back to our little list. I don't have hoods on my tanks, but that's because I didn't buy kits. But the lights that come with kits almost never are good enough to grow anything other than those few green plants that I've kind of told you about. There's some plants that would grow in a friggin' closet. Some of the stuff that lives down under here with no light. I'm trying to see what all is trying to grow in here. Some mosses and things like that. By the way, those little white things, those are eggs from a nearite snail. Although they've got an odd shape, so. But nope, here's the culprit right here. This is a zebra nearite horned snail. And look at those funky spikes, and it's yellow and black. Kind of cool. But it lays eggs on any hard surface. Word to the wise, yes, I appreciate the little guy for eating all the hard to scrape off crud on the glass, but he does have a price, which is laying these hard calcium eggs everywhere. So the next thing that we're looking at in a tank kit, you might be getting a thermometer. A lot of them don't even come with a thermometer, or maybe they come with one of the ones you stick on the side. Do not use those as your sole source of telling the temperature in your tank. Those are pretty much garbage. They'll give you a rough idea, but there's a lot of ways to break them, or that they just don't work anymore. Even just bending it too hard. The next thing, there's a lot of times there's samples and stuff like that. So they'll give you a little packet of food, or they'll give you, to try some product that their partners with make, and hopes that you buy more stuff. And that's not really worth anything. So altogether, in your kit, you sometimes, usually with the larger kits, you are saving money. So let me just say this now, because I bet you've sat here, or maybe you've scrubbed through clicking the thing and waiting to hear, what do I need to do? When should I buy a kit? Should I buy a kit? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, should you buy a kit? If you're having a betta or a goldfish or something small like that, or something singular in a small group, yeah, go ahead and buy a kit and just buy whatever style you like. Pretty simple. You're going to probably need to buy a thermometer if you care. Most of those fish can withstand room temperature as long as it's indoors. You're going to buy plants if you care, or fake plants if you care, and a net if that didn't come with it, which is usually cheap. And that's just fine. You need to buy it food, obviously. And in theory, you want to buy it testing kits and things like that. And one of the big expenses that gets ignored is that when you get a kit, I have yet to see pretty much any kit put together in mass, other than like stores have put them together, that have stone and wood and gravel, which is what we call substrate, or fertilized substrate. So believe it or not, a bag of this stuff, which is growing all these plants, which if you're into plants, I'm going to toot my own horn here, but this is how you grow beautiful plants, is with a light that costs $200, and instead of 20 or 30 like this one back here that's just on to illuminate so I can see things, and all it seems to grow is this floating duckweed that drives me insane. Um, but it's whatever you want to make of the hobby, how much you want to get into it. And in some cases, you get what you pay for, but others, there are big workarounds that are great. So, Substrate is one of those that has an awesome workaround. So, gravel. If you just want a non active, so there's two types of substrate, that's active and passive, or non active, neutral. And this is active. It has ammonia, it has nitrates, iron, phosphorus. It has things that the plants want in it. It's almost plant fertilizer. And that complicates cycling the tank because it's putting off stuff that's toxic to the fish. And so you have to grow more and more of that beneficial bacteria to make sure that your fish are safe, that they're not going to get dosed off with that load of nasty stuff. So, if you're not there yet in your hobby, which I'm going to assume you're not yet if you're watching this video, then you're going to want the normal gravel substrate. Something like, and sorry for the mess as always, I'm about to clean out this room completely. There's just riverstone, that's free, okay, you guys? But you want to boil it. I know rocks can explode when you boil them, but just be careful and don't stand right over it. And you can boil a little bit of rock at a time if you want. It is time consuming to do that. But I usually just get a big old, I'll do like 20% bleach and, 80% water. Stir it around, put the rocks in it. There's bleach in it, and then I'll just let it sit in the bucket overnight and then have the bleach evaporate off. It will soak into the center of the stone, but bleach is really just chlorine in the end for all intents and purposes. And so up here we have fluorite and sand from like a fish store, and that stuff's usually 10 or 20 bucks for a big bag of it. Here we have fish store, pea gravel, and some sand. And it depends what you want to do. If you want to raise catfish and have them breed, you're going to probably want some sand. If you want, just for looks, like bright pink and green and whatever rocks, those are going to be neutral substrates, and they're just whatever you pay at the store. Now, what's in the shrimp fish tank is actually a substrate that is designed to lower the pH because certain shrimps, fish, plants, whatever, you name it, like either higher or lower pH. But in this case, it keeps everything around 6.0 or 6.5, which is a little lower than out of my tap. And so that is the point of that. It costs more money. If you're not into this hobby, you would be sorry, that's probably dizzying when I turn that fast. But you would be blown away and appalled at how expensive gravel, basically, dirt, basically, can be. So you can check out like Dustin's Planted Fish Tanks channel to see how you would go about doing a literal dirt tank, like with Miracle Grow dirt or whatever dirt you'd buy at the store or get out in your backyard. There's some issues with that, but whatever. Let's talk today about if you were to buy gravel. Your two choices are the ones that have all the stuff that makes your plants grow. It's got what plants crave, and it allows all these beautiful reds and complex plants when it's paired up with CO2 and a light. Now, that's how I'm growing these delicate and interesting plants. I think it's totally worth it. To me, it brings me a lot of joy to see the complexities and the different subtleties, the patterns of the leaves and the fish swimming in and out of them, and how the leaves close up at night and things like that. Live plants are where it's at. I have no algae in this tank usually, other than the stuff I was complaining about earlier, which is on the glass, which honestly it just takes some elbow grease. So that brings me to my next subject after Substrate, which they don't include in the kits, and that's going to cost you 10 to $100 no matter what. Let me give you some advice. Go get pool sand or play sand from Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can get it for like $5 to $10 for a 25 or 50 pound, whatever it is, bag. Or you can get like river rock or pebble, gravel, things like that for $5 to $10 for a 25 to 50 pound bag. Yet again, depending on their sales and stuff. I've done that and literally taken care of all the tanks in a rack before, like 6 or 7 tanks that way. So, what else are you going to need? Even if you buy the kit, you're going to need just things that come up that you wouldn't think about. Like a razor for cleaning the algae off your tank. Like a net if it didn't come with a net. Like, what else is there out there? Yeah, your fish get sick and they need things like ick X when they get ick, and that's $12 or 14 with tax in Seattle. Oh, you buy a sucker fish to clean the walls. Well, guess what? They need spirulina wafers or giving them cucumbers. So there comes more money. You buy a fish, and it turns out that it is a type of fish that needs more oxygen in the water, like panda loaches or I'm trying to think here, like Danios, Rasboras, CPDs, things like that. And by the way, these fish are mating. Watch what's happening. These cories are, this male is pushing his head against this female, literally trying to get her to give out eggs. And when she does, if she does, he will then get into the position and fertilize those eggs that she drops. Now, it doesn't look like she's dropping them, or they're going to go hide somewhere that's good for hiding eggs, like back in that corner. But I just thought I'd share that with you. But you don't see this kind of stuff when they don't feel at home with the right plants and things, That was called the T-shaped position. You can't get into some of the cooler stuff about keeping fish that happens when you don't imitate nature. So my overall opinion is, if you have a little fish or a betta or just a couple fish, these kits are fine. They're a good deal, like $30 to $60 kits. That's fine. You're going to need to buy another $50 to $100 worth of stuff over the course of the next 6 months, especially if you follow their instructions on these filters and stuff. Just because you're going to need, that little castle you want. You're going to need, in my case, if I don't want to wait, you can buy bio starters, like cultures already, that will allow you to jumpstart your tank cycling, and you can actually put your fish in the day of, no problem now. The only one that I have actually tested and had no ammonia, no nitrites the entire time, which I don't know what that does to the ecosystem in the long time, if it corrects itself to normal, or if there are some lasting effects of that, I can't say. But ATM products, the same guys who do fish tank remodels for celebrities on Animal Planet, they do that, and they sell this stuff called ATM Colony, and it will start up your fish tank that day. You can put fish in it, so that's kind of cool if you don't want to wait for everything. But you need surface area, and like I said, plants are always good too. But if you buy a sucker fish for your 20-gallon tank, because he's going to clean the glass. Sorry, guys, this is gross. He's like pooping. He's going to poop. So what do you need? Well, all that poop builds up on the bottom, and yeah, it can be harmless after good bacteria breaks it down and it becomes fertilizer. But you can also get something like a power head or a filter in the form of the HOB, hang off the back, that just moves things around. A sponge filter, like I showed you earlier, doesn't move the water a lot. It slowly moves the water and not a ton. So that's why people buy these different things. There's also camera filters, which are designed to be hidden, so you can totally not have anything hanging off the side. All you have is a hose, but it's really the same idea as this. It just has a hose instead of this output. So those are another option, but they wouldn't come with a set. And the other thing is, some people like their tanks rimless, like this one here. These tanks are a lot more money. They're handmade. They don't use the same bracing techniques. There's no plastic on them. And you don't get this fogginess with the silicone where it's jointed, and you don't have this plastic. So there's choices there too. And now there are kits with that kind of stuff. Like some of the fluval, like $300 kits. I've seen fluval. I've seen who was the other one? Marineland, I think, had one. But there's some and Aqua. Which one was it? Mr. Aqua for a while had some stuff. But just different groups make different stuff. Whoa, here comes all these messages. I don't know if I was missing them or whatever. But yeah, people are just commenting on the substrate that people use pool sand in their breeding tanks. It's a great way to do it. You just get it and wash it lightly. You can even just cut a hole in the 50-pound plastic bag or whatever and fill it with water and just run it and shake the bag, and as soon when the water starts to run clear, it's probably good enough. I do stuff like that all the time. Don't overcomplicate it. Now, the other thing you're going to definitely need is Prime or C-Chem or, Guardian Angel or Support or Clarity or whatever they're called. They always have these kind of silly names, but it gets rid of chlorine out of the water. So you'll need to buy that. The cheapest you're going to find that is $5 or $6. If you have a little tank, that's fine. But you're going to want to buy the $15 bottle if you have a 20 to 40 gallon tank. But yeah, the gravel and substrate and rocks cost a lot. Fake stone, fake castles, that kind of stuff, that costs so much money, and you can't just put anything in your tank. You do want to be careful, but check out my other videos on what rocks are safe to put in your tank and what substrates are safe to put in your tank. What you need to do to put something else like a castle or a mermaid figurine or whatever in your tank. You really need to seal it with an acrylic and make sure it doesn't have certain properties, paints and things that can make the fish sick. But that's where people spend a lot of money, and also in things like you're going to need a gravel vac to clean the tank. You're just going to have to do it to suck up the poo water. Now, Bob says, have you tried cultured plants? No, I haven't, like, specifically, but every plant you buy, if it's been in a tank that's cycled, has bacteria on it, and even if you bought just that one plant, it would cycle your tank much quicker than if you have nothing cycling your tank. So if you're at the fish store, especially a small one, I'm not saying like Petco. Honestly, I wouldn't even want the water from Petco. When I get fish from Petco, well, from anywhere, but especially Petco, I get out a net, I pour all the water out, I get some dechlorinized water, I wash the fish off. That's how much I don't want the water of 1,000 farm-raised fish or wild caught and sitting in a pen with a bunch of other fish on my fish. And that's before a quarantine usually too. So with the plants, I would try to buy them online or from a good source. You can get them you can get them cloned, and that like a tissue culture. Sometimes it has other names like propagated indoor, or there's just so many words that they use in the tissue culture is probably the most common you'll see, and that is saying that There are no probiotics or anything in there. It has been kept sterile on purpose. There's no snails or anything. Whereas if you go and you buy a plant, like for instance, something with a lot of surface area, like you buy this bushy plant, you're going to introduce whatever bacteria is on it into your aquarium. And if you don't have established bacteria that's more wily and substantial than it, it will take over. So that's why you want to establish, your aquarium, and why we do things like quarantine critters before we throw them in. Um, let's see here. I'm just looking at the comments really quick. Do do do. Uh, there's lots of lists out there of being easy plants to take care of, low light plants, high light plants, mid light plants. It's all up to you. My advice is, if you've never had a fish tank, get a fish tank. Get whatever fish you would want in it. But it's easiest to start out with something like guppies or, believe it or not, goldfish and tetras, or not tetras, and angelfish. Angelfish are mean, goldfish are mean, and cichlids, they're usually kind of mean compared to other fish. And the other one that's rough sometimes to take care of, what was it I was going to tell you? I was going to tell you is so the goldfish are rough, cichlids. Okay, I'm drawing a blank, but basically some of the fish that you have probably grown up thinking they're easy fish to take care of and whatnot are actually difficult. They're just hardy. They're the ones that killed all the other fish and lived through it, lived through the bad water conditions. So, a betta. So if you just want to take care of a fish alone, those are great choices, but they're going to but goldfish and things, they're going to eat your plants. They will likely beat up on other fish. They'll definitely eat shrimp. Same with bettas. And they are beautiful, so I understand it. But you can get a kit, and you're just going to need prime and maybe fertilizer if you have plants. But wait and see. Wait and see how your plants do without fertilizer. There's some plants that don't really need a lot of fertilizer. Maybe they just need a little more light, and maybe you're in a place with enough natural light that you don't need it. Um, who knows? The other things you're going to need are a bucket, towels, a sponge, something to clean the glass, because Windex is full of ammonia. If you spray Windex from here, you're going to get ammonia straight in your water, and you're going to kill, literally, I've had that happen in like a 10 or 20 gallon tank. I have had ammonia kill all my shrimp, hundreds of dollars of shrimp. You live and learn. And yeah, you can also, speaking of what I see people mentioning in the chat, one of the easiest ways to take care of plants in your tank and get going with real plants is root tabs. What you do is you take your gravel or whatever and you buy, where are they? Some root tabs, which look like this. They basically have what plants crave, and you just put them under the soil, like a dozen of them, or gravel, and your plants will pull the nutrients that they need out of those. And it also offs into the water, but be careful, you'll need to test your water. Which brings me to the other thing that they don't include, which is a test kit, which is the API Gold Standard Liquid Test Kit with these guys, the reagents, and the little test tubes of a standard 5mm size that everyone in the hobby knows. Basically, you're going to need that. It's about $30 for the one that has all the tests you could need. Really, you want a nitrogen test, so nitrite and nitrate when you're cycling. The only time you're probably going to use the nitrite test is to make sure your tank is cycled, and in the few months after you've set up your tank. Thank you so much, Bob. We got a $10 super chat. thank you. I wanted to let people know Bob is always of great support in this place, but so are a lot of other folks. And if you can't necessarily support today, but in the long run, I tell you something that saves you a whole bunch of money, or maybe your favorite fish, something like that. If you want to support the channel, you can always make a super chat on my live streams, or you can go to my Patreon account, which has links in the description. And that is somainkdesigns.com. I think it's linked to my business name, graphic design, for some odd reason, rather than Secret History. But search Secret History Living in Your Aquarium, you'll find it. Hello from Miami, Helcio. Did we establish if I was saying that right, or Helcio? Now, the next level, the step up above all of this, you're gonna need maybe an airline for more oxygenation. Maybe you want CO2. Maybe you want a giant, like I have here, 20-pound tank that won't run out until the dinosaurs re-evolve and die all over again. No, this thing will run this whole room, even though this whole room is not on CO2. So let me just show you real quick what I'm talking about here. This is CO2. You can see this. You can see better the colors in other pictures. But this is CO2. This is what it looks like. You can see all the colors, textures, the different species of plants, and thus sometimes different animals we can keep. When it's CO2, you can keep plants like that red Godzilla, Bucephalandra wavy. And the Corys are good. Oh, they're going to be laying eggs in there. I can already see her doing the belly twitch. So I will look in. You know what I should do is turn down the light, because this male is real excited, and he's going to bug her until she lays eggs. So later tonight, there will be some white eggs here and probably up there, depending on if anybody munches on them. But long story short, this is the kind of vegetation and crazy plants you can get going with these crazy Dr. Seuss plants. This one closes up at night and it's peach in the day. There's that nearite snail, up to no good. If you don't have CO2, you can have the classic goldfish bowl, but still, if you do things correctly, you can have quite a bit of life. No CO2, no CO2, no CO2. And so these tanks are set up, and look at that. They think it's nighttime. They've stayed up past the light, and their internal clock tells them. But these shrimp are eating off of the filter, and they're eating that stuff that we mentioned earlier. These Cory catfish, they're a great starter fish. And the other thing that I would say is if you're getting a kit, you can probably piece together everything cheaper, but I know that's a headache to some people. But you're not going to get things like these 20 long tanks. And these are my favorite tanks for breeding small to nano fish in, like endlers and things like that. I've been breeding plecos and endlers in the same 20 long tanks, and sometimes shrimp too even, all in one tank together. And it's like the most bang for your buck. Plants, you see the colors and stuff aren't going to be as vivid. I've got mops for spawning. That's for a whole other video. In here, we've got like moss balls and just more like weeds that you would find in a cold water lake in North America or Europe. That's what you're going to be growing without CO2 and fertilizers, most likely. There are exceptions, and you can get to know that stuff better with time, but that's kind of how the ball rolls. So let's go upstairs. We'll finish this live cast off, and in it, I would say that you can set up those tanks that I just showed you. You can set up those tanks for $25 for the tank, $15 for a cheap little hang off the back, and then you stuff it with cheap old cotton and save the charcoal filter for if you ever need to get toxins or meds out of a tank. And then other than that, buy some plants, get some plants from a friend, buy a starter pack, something like that. Here we have another CO2 tank. This tank is very CO2 rich. And in it, you can see probably better from this angle, all the colors and textures again. Um, I can literally keep twice as many fish in this tank than I can in a non-CO2 tank. Now here's a guppy you could keep in any of these kit tanks with the even stuff, with the stuff that I talked about, the basic stuff. No problem. And you can have shrimp in your tanks too without any of the high-tech stuff in a kit. You're fine. But plants like this one here, this is Wallachia. I've heard it said so many different ways. It is super fragile, and especially to get any pink out of it, it is a nightmare without CO2 and ferts and water flow. I'm breeding or attempting to in the future, near future, to breed these little panda loaches, and it's all about, and I'm breeding blue shrimp in here, also a baby one versus their parents. And then plants. I've paid for all my tanks, starting with this 20-gallon, 17.5-gallon tank. This is another rimless style one. This light is a knockoff of a really high-end light, and this light is probably $70. But to really get the colors you see in this tank and the different plants, I know that live stream, everything looks washed out by the light. But to get all these colors and textures and things like that, let's look on it this way. Maybe you'll see the colors better, like the reds and stuff. See, they look all washed out here. I use two lights. This one is available at Petco, and it's decent. I've used it on a 20 long to grow pretty good plants in low tech and high tech. But the more light you have, the more intense you can do carpeting and aquascaping. Stuff that you probably see on Google and you're like, how do they do that in their tanks? Well, it's not really a tank like the way you think of a fish tank back in the day. As I mentioned downstairs earlier, these are those tissue culture cups. They have plants in them that are guaranteed to not have any snails or bad viruses or fungus or anything in there that's going to attack your tank. So you can buy those for 10 or 12 or $15 a pop and put them in a tank and have no fear that you're going to throw something off. But I wanted to let you guys know here, and this has taken years and years of practice and just having fish, playing with things. I still have problems. I still get things wrong, obviously. But in this tank, this is a low-tech tank. There is a filter on it with floss in it, and it has these things that came with it, but I removed everything out of them. So there's just filter floss and a sponge and in there for surface area. Then these rocks and wood and things, they all have the good bacteria on them. They're so well seasoned. I know that's not pristine, but that is what nature looks like. You don't go to a pond and see, perfectly polished mahogany, okay? So these mosses and they're not lichen, but little colonies called aufuchs. There's a whole video on that. AUWF or AUFWOCH. I don't know. I can't spell it out right now off the top of my head, but aufuchs. There's a video on what those are and why you need them. In this tank, I have double the amount of fish that should be in here, inch by inch rule. And because of that, though, because of the plants and the fact that I'm using floodlights for your outside for like if you have a deck. These are two 30-watt floodlights. They get hot. I'm gonna show you guys. So like this corner over here is like pretty dark, right? I can light it up insanely with these things. So good lighting and having the fish go to the bathroom a lot and just balancing it with the right kind of plants, the right kind of fish, and taking plants out when there's a lot of fish and adding more plants, or when there's not enough fish and adding more plants when there's too many fish. Watching, if a fish dies, then you kind of investigate, make sure that all your variables are good. But the less variables you have, the easier. So in the end, yeah, depending on where you live, a kit could be an okay idea, but you need to know you're in store for buying other stuff. Depending on the fish and the plants, if you want to do plants, which I think you should, uh, you need stuff like nets. You need stuff like scissors for your plants. You need fertilizers for your plants. All that stuff can be gotten for probably $25 to $50. You can get set up with that. Your fish, you're going to need prime or some sort of dechlorinator. It's going to be $5 to $10 or $15 depending on the size of the bottle. Gonna need some food. You might need 2 or 3 kinds of food. You should be feeding your fish frozen food if you can. I mean, there's lots of things you should do and theoretically are best for your fish, but you can buy that $4 flake food that is just made out of crushed fish and shrimp guts and flour, or you can get the stuff that's like pure crushed, dried out. Brine shrimp and beef heart and spirulina and algae that's exactly what the fish eat in the wild, all that kind of stuff. And if you're breeding fish, it's a no-brainer. You need to get the better stuff. You can't even breed them on without it. Oh, Halcio Pires or Pure, thank you so much for that $10. I really appreciate both the super chats. I was going to say, have that Patreon out there if you guys watch this later on and you want to support the channel. The channel's been going a while, and I really just want to keep it going. I know that I cover videos, like the last few have been on like atomic chemistry and organic chemistry and all sorts of stuff that's kind of out there or very, very fish nerdy, even for hashtag fish fam. But I want to do some videos again, going back over the basics of things. I have my friend Ben. We're going to be setting up the aquarium. You notice over here, there's an aquarium missing. Made my wife happy, made me sad, made my friend happy. So 2 happies and a sad, that makes, it breaks even at least. So if not, makes me happy that he'll have that aquarium and carry it on for me. Puffer fish. These are fish that shouldn't live with your other small fish because they rip them up. They'll even rip up big fish. Yet they're chilling with ember tetras in their zone. They're chilling with cribs in their zone. Well, she's being weird. She's all colored up like she's ready to mate, which is weird because she's already mated. She already has babies in tow. She has some baby puffer fish in tow, which is bizarre. They think that she's mommy. And I guess the adult puffer fish who don't really raise their babies were just like, sweet, free daycare. There's a pleco chilling over there. So you can see how much life is in here. A lot of what you do in your tank has to do with also balancing zones. So, you can have a lot of guppies in a tank. They're a hard fish. That's what you're looking at there. That's actually an endler. But you can have those or danios, tetras, mollies or swordtails, platies. They're hardy fish that will hang out at the top, move quickly. These little leopard guys are all endlers. And Alexandra, Cindy M, hello. H2O2 to oxygenate the shrimp tank, did it, and all my shrimp started moving around. Interesting. I've thought about actually putting nitrogen gas into the tank like pure nitrogen and pure oxygen, just to see what happens, like to a test tank. But I just haven't had the money or heart to that. Um, let's see here. How long does tap water need to stand to be 100% dechlorinated? Eleanor, that's a great question. That will help a lot of people probably. If you have a little bucket or a bowl, if you have a bowl this size or a 5-gallon bucket, 48 hours you would be for sure okay. 24 most likely. Every municipality uses different chemicals. Some don't even use chlorine, some use chloramine. Some use chlorine or different chloride salts with in conjunction with chlorine and fluoride and salts and stuff like that. So it's a little different everywhere you go, but most of the time, like bleach, it'll evaporate out. And the variables are how much was in it to begin with and how much the water's moved around. So the more the water's moving and the less that was in it, the quicker it's going to evaporate off. But it is lighter than water, and it will come to the top eventually, just as it settles, kind of, I guess, as the water settles down. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I don't want to lie to you guys because volume, density, weight, and expansion and surface area, all that stuff could be playing a factor, and I can't tell you definitively about if it's lighter than water. It may not be actually lighter than water. But what you need to know is it evaporates quicker than water. And basically, yeah, Bob says before we had dechlorination, it was 24 to 36 hours, or you could boil the water for 15 minutes and let it cool to room temperature. I use chemicals because tap can have other chemicals. I use the chemicals because the tap can have other chemicals. Yeah, so it really depends on where you live, if you're working off well water or city water. City water can change. It can depend on the time of year, how close you are to the treatment plant, stuff like that. But I usually use dechlorinator myself. And one note on dechlorinator is they have found that substantially it hurts fish eggs. It causes them to calcify and actually harden up. It takes calcium and other things and sulfur and it bonds, and it actually catches onto the outside of the egg, and the fish can't break free. The baby fish, when it's time for them to be free, they can't. So there's reasons to use that to evaporate. In that case, in the case of shrimp, like Taiwanese bee shrimp, you shouldn't be starting with those shrimp if you're just starting in aquarium stuff. But with cherry shrimp, you could just start, and evaporation or distilled water is fine. Evaporated, like a 5-gallon bucket that sat there for 2 or 3 days. That's what I would do to be safe, and just keep 2 of them there, and you'll have one ready to go, no matter what. But I use, because of the volume of what I have going on here, I use like Prime, pretty much the brand name Prime. There's also Seachem, there's Seachem Prime, and then there's like Fluval makes one, Topfin makes one. There's a bunch of them. And as I said before, they all have some silly name like Tranquility or like Balise, like balance and fish, or like Fish Balance. Some goofiness like that. Also, don't read too much into right now at Petco. Don't go there for your fish meds. Sorry, Petco. They are not carrying things like erythromycin or dewormer. They've gotten rid of all of their old medications that were like prescription level veterinary medications, and they are just using herbal stuff that is not proven. I mean, if you want to put garlic in your water, go do that at home. That's fine. It does have medicinal properties for fish, That's been known for years, but it's not going to cure a good or a bad case of bacterial infection from a fight or from a cut or something. So, and same with PetSmart is cutting back on that. They still have erythromicron and a few other things, but Petco has used their Imagitarium, I think it is. It's a terrible name. Sorry, guys. Sorry to talk bad about Petco. Because I know some people that's their only option and so forth, and that's where you get these kits and stuff. That's where I get the big tank sales. But yeah, so like Bob was saying, chlorine isn't the only thing in tap waters. That's right. So prime and some of these other things, you got to look at the label, but they can trap things like ammonia, nitrates, nitrites, and they'll trap that for like 24 to 48 hours. Then it becomes released, which you have to be careful because if your tank isn't cycled and you dump a bunch of prime or stress coat in your tank and you think, now it says I have no ammonia, that's trapped, surrounded by, it's like this rock and my hand is the prime, and no, the ammonia, this rock can't get out right now, but as the prime degrades and parts of the sulfur oxygenates and sulfuric salts come off, uh, some of this will come out and can cause damage and bond to other things, make other compounds, more complex compounds. And at a certain point, it breaks off to the point of it just doesn't hold on anymore. And then you've dumped out 2 days worth of it if you haven't fixed the origin of the problem or done a water change all at once. And so that's why you got to be careful, but also, you need to have something that takes care of the chlorine, but also some places this is where that $30 test kit that doesn't come with any of the aquarium kits comes in. Buy that kit, use those test tubes. You can take it to the store, but they usually use the little dip strips and really the shaking vial test kits or electronic test gear if you have the big money for that. 20 or $30 minimum for each type of thing. I use that because I have a lot of money on the line with the fish and plants that I keep in all the tanks. But basically, you want something better than just those strips. Those strips will give you an idea if your tank is suitable or not. Don't get me wrong, they are useful at a glance to say, ooh, I need to do a water change. But most people who've been in the hobby a long time, watch the fish, know the time scale, know how much they're feeding, how much junk there is or algae's growing, and we can kind of tell, oh, we need to change the water without having to do those tests. But that takes time to get that feel. I don't recommend anyone just assuming they have it right off the bat or anything like that. And as I said, bouncing off of Bob's comment, is that yeah, there can be stuff. Oddly enough, there can be other chemicals like copper in your water from your pipes, or maybe you live in Europe and you have lead because your pipes are from the 1700s or whatever. Uh, I don't think that would be the case very often anymore still, but just in case, maybe somewhere along the sewage line, it likely does have some very old metal in Paris or Rome or London. And that is all stuff that can break off, be in your water. And so you can get as they call it, an assay, ASSAY, I believe, of what is in your water, at least in the United States locally. They will come out and test it or test it at a local point of distribution. And if you ask them, it's even free in a lot of places or like $20 some other municipalities. But you get that assay and it tells you every chemical, metal, that's in your water in amounts over like 2 parts per million or something like that. And that can really help because like I think like 5 parts per million of copper will kill your shrimp. Like it is no joke. It is very poisonous. So there's lots of, yeah, dun dun dun, deadly copper. Coppers, you see the coppers, they killed the shrimp, the copper. That copper killed my shrimp. See? Why I oughta. No one probably gets my my reference. That's okay. You don't have to watch 1930s gangster movies. It's a weird thing to do. All right, you guys. So, have a great night. I'm going to leave it there. If you have more questions, if you want to follow up to this episode, please let me know. I know this isn't targeted at my normal crowd, but thanks for hanging out with me, like a fake name, and Cindy, and Eleanor, and Bob, all you cats that are, and Helcio, and thank you for the super chats, you guys. If this helps you out, saves you money, for those of you who are watching this later, you can help me out on the Patreon. That always helps. Even if it's a one-time donation and you just bail out after that, that's great. That's fine. So, thank you guys. Take care. In the comments, I'd like to see what you want to hear about next. If there's anything that maybe I skipped in the form of taking care of fish, I didn't talk about like heaters, how certain fish need them and not, because you should really be doing your research and looking up what kind of fish you want to keep is better, and finding out what they need is a lot better than buying gear and then tracking and trying to figure out what can live in the crappy tank you bought. You're going to be a lot happier if you say, I want a betta. Oh, wow, they live in really easy to maintain conditions. This is great. I got lots of choices. And instead of, I want a rare pleco that eats just meat, or I want a panda loach needs a TDS of under 50 and it needs moving water at triple the gallons that are in the tank every hour. Um, buy, figure out your species and what you want, and then figure out the gear you need. And if it's not practical, then figure out a different fish for now. And if it does work, great, and then there's compromise in the middle. But don't just go buy a kit and then be like, oh, I don't have a heater, I can't keep anything. Go spend the $30 or actually 40 for like an Aquarium or Marine Land heater. It'll be fine. Or turn the heat on in your room. Keep it in a warm spot in the house. Keep it above 70 in most of the fish, even if it says they need to be hotter. With discus and plecos kind of being exceptions. But yeah, I mean, there's endless things to do in this hobby, you guys. There is multiple lifetimes of things to learn, and I have barely begun to scratch the surface of it, as even somebody 80 years old who's been doing it their whole life could tell you. The more you learn, the less you know, and that is what is fun about this. And like Bob said, thank you. Hit that like button if you haven't yet. And if you haven't subscribed, ring that bell on my channel's info and stay updated on new stuff. If we have enough people in here that want videos on new things, I'll put those out, and we'll still do usually live chats are going to be on contemporary stuff, higher end, high tech stuff, or new fish or politics, things like that in the fish world. But I did this as a live cast because I knew it was going to be so long, and I thought maybe someone would have a question that was applicable. So this will be kind of the first part introduction in the series. I just thought kits were a good place to start. We can go into what it takes to set up your stuff later. Maybe we'll be sloped breeding tanks. You want to know about that for like cories and stuff like that. To try it with your longfin leopard danios. Yeah, great. So fake name for up in Canada wants to be breeding some leopard danios. Those are fun. They can be a bit nippy, but they're really beautiful. The bronzy copper color. I don't know if you've tried them. I don't know if you care or if you like what you have, but I like these firefin fire danios. I can't remember their Latin name off the top of my head, but my all-time favorite danio, well, that's hard to say, but my all-time favorite non-micro danio would probably be the Tin Winnie. It has all the like leopard chain spots on it, but it is a very shy towards other fish. But it comes out into the open water, and it has a beautiful gold color with like a purple iridescent fin. But yeah, maybe we'll do some videos again on plants and fish that have like a theme in common, like striped fish. I could almost just do it on this tank over here. Uh, all right, you guys. Well, have a great night. Thanks for holding it down, Bob. Thanks for chipping in on the super chat. Helkio. I want to get your name right, buddy. I appreciate you. These are all those little loaches I was talking about, the panda loaches. The adults are up there in a two-part group. In here, you can see algae is growing, but if you watch the video from the, you'll know that it is all okay and under control. All right, you guys, take care. Take care of your fish. Take care of your plants. Take care of each other and the people around you and yourself so that you can keep doing all of that. And, you know, the community is here for you. Helcio, great, got it. Perfect. Helcio, thank you and have a great night. But yes, as I was saying, take care of the things around you because it will come back to you. They will take care of you emotionally and literally in so many ways that you can never know. So for me, this is my quiet place, hide away from all the craziness going on in the world right now. When you turn on the TV and you're being sold something, or they're trying to get you to buy something, not literally, but in your mind. So swim on, everybody, like Eleanor said, and take care. Peace.